Over 5,000 email inboxes. That's how many the deliverability expert we are talking to today is directly responsible for. And he helps them all land in the primary inbox every time, and you can too with one powerful tool and some knowledge on how to use it. Because the truth is, if you can't avoid spam, you can't get clients with cold email. Because no matter how good your offer is, no one will see it. In this video, we're going to run through everything cold email deliverability from top to bottom in excruciating detail. So use the timestamps to jump around to what you need. By the end, you'll be an expert in getting way more engaged leads from cold email. I believe this is the best free training on the internet. We'll also cover the one tool you need to make sure you avoid spam each and every time on autopilot. And stay tuned till the end, because Cody drops deliverability secrets that many top agency owners aren't even aware of. By the way, if you want to check out the #1 email deliverability tool, EmailGuard, you can use GROW at checkout for a special discount. That's GROW at checkout. Check the link below. All right, I'm here with Cody Smith, founder of EmailGuard. Do you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Yeah, hey guys. Like super simple introduction. We've been running our platform for the past few months now. We got into email about 2 years ago. Have essentially been building a lot of products, SaaS products, and doing software consulting for about 15, 20 years, a whole lot. And yeah, I mean, we just built this product because we felt like there was a big need in the space. What we're doing right now, we saw that there's like 5 or 6 different products that wanted to do the same thing. So if you wanted to, for example, know your email setup health, or for example, domain health, inbox health, you had to go through like 5 or 6 different tools, and it was pretty disconnected. So we decided to kind of build this one platform and have it be in such a way that you can integrate with most popular sending tools to be able to get like the best bang for your buck, and also to get like real results and not just feel good metrics. So that's just a quick intro there for me.
Nice. I think that was a too modest of an intro. Really, who Cody is he's the Satoshi Nakamoto of deliverability. He's come here to save the day and take down the centralized overlords of deliverability and inbox management, the popular providers that give us fake health scores. And that's the reason why he can't show his face right now, because if ESPs saw him, if Google Outlook saw him, they would want to dismantle him and take him down and find out all his secrets to actually getting you guys in the inbox. So this is going to be a bit of an atypical video on this channel, but I want to sit down with Cody here because I think what he's doing is really revolutionary, and I think a lot of people struggle with deliverability. Even this week, with Gmail to Gmail deliverability sort of tanking for a lot of people, I oddly enough didn't really experience this issue. But yeah, basically we're going to cover everything from the super simple, how to source your domains, set them up, how to warm them, how often you should be replacing those domains or inboxes, or how to know when inboxes are going to burn, and then into more nuanced things such as, what type of sending infrastructure should you be using, how you should monitor your domain health, and how ESPs are actually looking to detect you as spam and how you can protect yourself from it. So yeah, if you're ready, Cody, we can dive in.
Let's do it, man.
Awesome. So off the rip, like, I have my own ways of kind of setting up my domains and my own, albeit often changing, kind of warming protocols, etc. But where do you think people should be, one, sourcing their domains, and should they be warming it up or not? Let's start there.
Yeah. So a lot of people right now, what we see in the space is that people are saying, okay, buy your domains from this registrar, don't buy it from this one. And there's just a whole lot of nuance, but there's no real data backing up what they're saying. Most people are just, kind of following the crowd. So if one person says it, then they all just start, parroting that. So the way that we like to look at things is that, sure, you can experiment and you can test stuff, but at the same time, don't go all in unless you have real data. So keeping that in mind, when it comes to sourcing domains, we've had a really good experience with using for example, Spaceship, GoDaddy, Namecheap, essentially Pork Bun. Whatever place has discounts, we kind of go there, and we want to save some money on domains. And we've seen that there's no real difference in terms of where you buy your domains from. The only sort of small caveat there is it does matter how you forward your domain, and we can kind of dive into that a little bit more when we get into the advanced topics.
Hmm.
But for the most part, you can buy them, from any of these types of services. Now, most people also then go into, okay, should I buy .com or .co or .net, that sort of stuff. Typically, what we've seen is that the top five sort of extensions, or the top five TLDs that you should be looking for, is .com, .co, .info, .net, .org. And then there's some more expensive ones too, like .io. But within that, those five or six, you're pretty good. You probably don't want to go after, TLDs like XYZ or .biz and stuff like that, because we've actually seen spam filters flag those way more often. But, essentially, if you have a sale on .co, for example, you don't necessarily have to spend more money to buy the .com, and you can save some money there and just get the .co. So,
And on that TLD note, like one of the things I'm going to be preaching as we go along here, and that I've used to basically run all of my deliverability outside of actual placement tests, and how I treat it, is just strictly common sense. So on that note of like .xyz being something to avoid, well, .xyz is one of the most common domains that get given away along with website hosting providers, as well as like website creation kind of tools. So it's often a free domain that gets given out to anyone that's trying to start their business, which means in all likelihood, it's seeing a lot of potentially low skill, low quality kind of throughput from an email perspective. So that could potentially explain why it may not be recognized as a super positive domain or TLD from ESPs, but also it's huge in Web3. So those domains are likely sending a bunch of keywords that ESPs just don't want to see, the same way they were banning, Web3 ads on Twitter and Instagram. So just my little note to chime in there, where I tend to avoid, or why I tend to avoid those TLDs. But carry on.
No, it makes complete sense, man. Yeah, I think like from all of our essentially customers, what we've seen is that if you're using the 5 or 6 that I listed, you're typically getting really good reply rates. And then in terms of doing warm up, so this is a pretty sensitive topic for most people. So some people, they do warm up and they get great results. Some people don't do warm up and they still get really great results. One of the things that we've seen, particularly for warm up, is it depends on how it's done. But let's just take a step back and let's take a look at it from an ESP perspective, right? So Google, I don't know if I don't know how many people know this, but last year, I think it was in January of last year, where all the big sequencing platforms, not Smartly, not Instantly, but the big ones that were more popular back then, they essentially got told by Google that, hey, you have to stop offering warm up. It's against our terms of service. So they literally had to like stop it overnight, and most of them, they have a loophole.
Zoho was first, right? Zoho kind of came out first with that as well, right?
No, I think Zoho was about like 3 to 4 months like later. So
okay, interesting.
Yeah, this was in January of 2023. I think Zoho was around March, April. I hope I got my dates right there. But what happened is that you had platforms like Woodpecker, Gmass, Reply. They all got told that, hey, look, you're using our API. You can't do warm up. If you do, we're going to restrict your access. And now they're kind of forced to comply, because the way that they let their customers connect is there's no multi-step process with copy pasting the client IDs into your Google admin panel. So they had to comply. They did use sort of a loophole where a lot of these companies spun up separate subsidiaries that are doing warm up separately, so they still wanted to capitalize on it. But the point of me saying this is that Google doesn't like warm up, right? And then again, you saw the same thing with Zoho as well. Zoho literally was looking at all the instantly warm up emails, and they're like, we don't want this, and they started banning people even if they were just doing warm up. So we know for a fact that ESPs don't like warm up. Okay. And now we also know that if you look at the kind of emails that are being sent with warm up, they're very easy to track. and it's very simple for ESPs to figure out which of these emails are warm up and which one of them is essentially real emails.
Hmm.
The other downside to warm up is that there's just a lot of people in the game right now. So if you have a warm up pool, people can have their email set up incorrectly, so you're gonna start getting bounces, right? You're gonna start to get issues, and at the same time, if you take one more step back and you look at how these emails are even going back and forth, they're on the same network, they're using the same Google connection, the same Microsoft connection, right? So it's extremely simple for ESPs to figure out what's going on here. So you're not necessarily building up your reputation, right? Warm up worked really well when it first came out. But I think nowadays, and again, I would tell people to split test this, but in my experience, the people that we work with, they're not doing warm up and they're seeing really great results, and they're not really harming their essentially like response rates.
Awesome. So I have one note of pushback on this idea of warm up, and one thing that's kept me interested in keeping it incorporated in my domains, not necessarily off the rip. The way we're tackling it is we don't have a warm up period where we're not sending to real domains. Instead, what happens is warm up and sending happen simultaneously, and they scale together almost like linearly. And my argument for warm up is this, and let me know your take. The argument for me is that if you're sending to, let's say, riskier domains, and for me, that's going to always be local businesses. That's the riskiest place I send emails. So for them, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make sure that in the grand scheme of things, bounce rate across all my sends are as low as possible. In order to reduce that bounce ratio, in my mind, having warm up going out alongside main sending can help kind of bring down that total bounce rate across all my sends. What do you think of that use case for warm up?
I think the whole concept when it comes to warm up, I still think the concept is valid for sure. It's
Mhm.
just that the way that it's being
The way
done
it's
right
executed?
now, yeah, the way that it's being done right now, I think is it's been compromised. One of the things that we're actually experimenting with and playing around with is building distributed warm up pools, but also then taking the campaign copy that you're sending and warming that up as well. And we can kind of dive in after the fact into bounces and exactly how to reduce them. But what we're seeing right now is if you have a pool that's not within some of these popular sequencers and you're warming up, you're going to see better results versus if you were using like the built-in warm-up pools. Um,
Yeah.
but again, I would still recommend people, not to of course take blanket advice and do a split test because right, like there's general things that we can talk about, but then anecdotally, some people can do really well with warm-up, right, and some people can do really well without warm-up too. So we can be general of what we're seeing working, but then anecdotally, if you split test and you see something's working, I would say stick with what's working for you, just so you can continue booking more meetings.
Okay, amazing. So grab your domains, make sure you're using the top 5 domain providers. I think you said .co, .com, .info, .org, and maybe
.net.
.net. There it is, .net. I tend to steer towards .co, .info, and .com, but good to know I have those as backups. I avoid .org because I don't like the connotation. I never want to
Yeah,
misrepresent myself kind of thing.
that's fair.
Um, so we have that. We have kind of decide on warm up for yourself. But when it comes to scaling your sending, do you have any protocols that you're seeing work across your kind of customer base? Anything that they're reporting at EmailGuard?
Yeah, one of the things that we're noticing right now is so there's both of these camps, people that are doing warm up and people that are not doing warm up.
Hmm.
But both camps, what they're doing is when they get their domain, they're ramping up the sending. So for people that are still doing some level of warm up, they'll ramp up the warm up email. So they'll start off with two a day, then five, etc. And then until they get to some sort of number like 2025 warm up emails, and then they'll start scaling up, ramping up the cold emails. So they'll start
Hmm.
off with like two a day, then five a day, etc., and they build that up. Um, the people that are not doing warm up, what we typically recommend and we've seen really good results with is say that you bought a brand new domain and you set up a brand new inbox, you can start sending from day one at a healthy number of 10 emails per day per inbox. and you run that for a whole week. And then the second week, what you would do is you would bump that up by 5. So you would send 15 emails per day per inbox and run that for the entire week. You do that until you get to about 25 or so emails per inbox per day.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of inboxes per domain, we've seen people use both combinations of essentially 2 inboxes or even 3 inboxes. What we also saw when we were running our tests is that the volume per domain also matters. So for example, we've seen that if your volume per domain is less than 100 emails per day per inbox, you're typically safe. So you can figure out whatever combination works for you, 2 inboxes or 3 inboxes. Both of them are working pretty well.
So just to clarify there, that would be 100 sends per day per domain. So the inboxes, for instance, would be like 33, 33, 34.
Yeah, exactly. As long as you're below that threshold, you're safe. We did a test where we intentionally tried to burn some domains to see what those limits might be. I don't know if other people have tested it, but when we got to 150 emails per day per domain, and this was specifically with Google, we started getting blocked right off the bat. Even though the emails that we were sending were to a totally private network of inboxes that we control, so there's no bounces, there's no spam complaints. But as soon as it hit, that volume where it went beyond 100, it started to, bounces went up, and it was just blocking our emails from going out.
Nice. And is there any reason that you choose to do chunks of increases? Like, why do you increase in blocks like that? Or why have you seen that as the most effective? Why not increase in smaller increments, in shorter intervals? And finally, is there any merit to varying the sending of your individual inboxes? For example, maybe one's at 26, another's at 24, another's is at 22.
Those are all really great questions, man. I think so what we ran tests to see if we ramped it up by smaller numbers per day. So for example, week 1 you send 1 the first day, then 2 the next day, and then 3, etc. We saw that there wasn't that big of a difference between doing that versus doing it in the chunked method that we're kind of recommending right now. So there's no real difference. So you're not losing anything. You're just able to send more emails using this way, so you can start sending emails faster. One of the other things that we're playing around with, and I think this is kind of what you're touching on, is how do you act more human with your sending? So right now, most people, they have a fixed number of emails that they send per day once they reach that 25, 30 limit, right? So if you can randomize that limit, so for example, you have a random number between 15 and 25 that you send per day per inbox, and that changes per day, you're acting more human. So then we haven't tested this just yet. It's on our backlog to test, but theoretically, you're acting more human, you're less likely to be blocked because, you have a variance in your sending volume. So definitely, I would recommend people test that out as well while we do it as well.
So that's one of the things that's had I would say the biggest impact kind of since the deliverability crisis. One was lowering total send volume across each domain. And then 2 seemed to be splitting up and varying that frequency. So what we do is we basically, again, back to common sense, your goal should basically be to look like a manual sending SDR at, some $100 million SaaS. So they're taking breaks in their sending. They're not going to send, at the exact same moment all the time. There's going to be variance to the sending. There's only so many emails they're going to send in an entire day. And in that same note, each email is going to be almost 100% unique. Exactly. And that's a key we can get into a little bit later. Because I've noticed that when I review copy, a lot of people are far too comfortable with like 4 areas of spin tags. But with that in mind, what I've taken into doing inside SmartLead is I have a kind of set number of sends and a set send interval on each inbox that is randomized between 17 and 25 minutes and then 17 and 25 sends. Every inbox gets a different one. This is a manual process. I would recommend getting a VA to do this for cheap if you don't want the headache. And then at a campaign level, what we do is we set our actual sending time and sending frequency on the campaign level to trigger in a shorter period of time than the actual inboxes themselves are allowed to trigger. So this way, triggers are actually going off all the time, and it's not always going to be a wave of, let's say, 50 emails going from 50 inboxes. Instead, sometimes only 11 inboxes will be ready and 11 inboxes will fire. And then there will be another wait time. And what this does is it makes it so inboxes are actually firing at 100% atypical rates. Like, there's never going to be an instance where they fire at the exact same time. And the final way that you make your sending look as unique as possible, or at least, again, this is some stuff that I've trialed and it seems to be having an impact. Just kind of strictly anecdotal before and after type of type of testing here, to be honest. Like we split test between one half of our inboxes and the other half of our inboxes, and then between campaigns that were very similar. And then the final thing is to just make sure the start time of your campaigns vary across the board. So every campaign gets a different start time. I think the value of this is that, one, you're making the entire network that you're sending on a little bit healthier, which is good. And you would hope that everyone's doing this. And then two, I think you're just looking more human in general. But it's hard to truly know the impact, right? Because obviously sequencers are public, right? You're sharing this with other people.
Yeah, 100%. I think some of the new sort of tools that people have been talking about on Twitter, with like these sort of private sequencers, they're following very similar practices to what you're talking about, where instead of sending the emails every, X seconds, they're basically truly randomizing it between the entire day. So, for example, instead of like all your emails going out in the morning, they're split out randomly between the entire workday. So it does look more human. So I think what you have set up is really cool in terms of deliverability, man.
Sweet. So we've covered a lot of interesting stuff. There's a few last kind of, let's call them just, let's help out everyone who's setting up their kind of first campaigns or trying to figure out some of their first campaigns. Maybe they're only a couple months into cold email. You've mentioned some ESPs. We've talked about them today. You seem to mention Google the most. Before we get into kind of the Google to Google issues that people may be seeing, which inbox providers would you recommend between Google, Microsoft, and private? Give us a quick, pro con list on why you hate some of them, like some of them. And then I think you want to introduce the idea of what Superwave is doing as well and how they might differ. And then finally, resellers. Should people be afraid of them? There's a lot of talk about resellers and whether or not they should or should not be used. Personally, I've used resellers for ages, and I think they're the last thing I look to blame when it comes to deliverability issues when I experience them, but I really want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, it's a big list.
So start off infrastructure. Where should people be looking for infrastructure for their inboxes?
So yeah, let me just kind of give you the whole like rundown between Google, Microsoft, and private from what we've seen so far. So we had a whole shift of people. First, Google was really good, then Google was bad and they shifted to Microsoft. Then Microsoft was bad and they shifted back to Google. So people, definitely bounce around. And then of course you have the SMTP type providers that start off really well, but again, there's a category of them, and we can dive in deeper as to why I don't necessarily recommend them for most people. But typically what we're seeing right now is
quickly.
A good split
no
test.
one use Mailscale. Carry on.
We're seeing a really good result with using inboxes from Google and Microsoft, and we actually buy them from resellers, and we can talk about why that's not such a bad thing that people might think it is. So look, if you were to buy directly from Google and Microsoft, right, you're paying, I think it's like what, $7, $7.50 per inbox.
I think
$8
like in certain cases now. Yeah.
Wow. And then like it's insane. So if you're scaling out cold email, it can become extremely extremely expensive. So one of the things that that we actually like recommend for that is, find a good reseller, but find one that you can trust. And, we have some recommendations we can make, obviously, but some of these resellers are a little bit sketchy because what they're doing is, so we'll talk about Google. Google has this program for nonprofits and for educational institutions where they can basically get Google Workspace for their entire organization for free. So what some of these people do is they falsify documents and they just get access to this free workspace panel, and then they just put thousands of people on there, or they so those are the kind of resellers that you don't want to be lumped in with. But if you can find real trusting type resellers, they work really well. For Google and Microsoft. So for Google, we're using something called cheap inboxes,
Mm-hmm.
cheapinboxes.com. They're essentially pretty new, but they're doing really well. There's also premium inboxes. They've been around, I think, for a few months now too. They also do really well.
Mm-hmm.
The other one that we also work with is Inboxology. They do both Google and Microsoft. They're pretty good in terms of their product. It's just that the customer service and the setup times are a little bit slower. So that's the one caveat there. But yeah, as long as you're using reputable resellers, there's literally no difference in terms of your reply rates. Um,
So how can a person diagnose whether or not a reseller is reputable? What are the questions they should be asking, or what should they see?
that's a great question, man. Most of the time, when you get an inbox from a reseller, specifically from Google, because I think most of the bad people are within that Google ecosystem. When you log in, um, for the first time, you'll see a screen that says something like "Welcome to Google for Nonprofits" or "Google for Education," kind of like a welcome screen. So if you see that, you've been duped. So that's like the biggest kind of indicator. But at the same
Amazing.
time, if you're going to resellers, don't just find one on your own. Get someone to refer you, because people in the community, they've built out that trust network, and that's why the ones that we mentioned here, those are ones that you can go to and know that you're getting the real deal, rather
Mhm.
than being duped.
Perfect. Perfect. I think that's great for people to know. Okay, awesome. And then, Google, Microsoft, we'll call them gold standard. Anything outside of that, why do you tend to want to avoid SMTP, like private, specifically private SMTP, where you kind of get your own IP? Is it that warming issue, right? Where you've kind of got a naked IP that you've got to run with and be a good boy on, let's say, or what's holding you back there?
Yeah, a lot of times what people don't understand is that there's categories of these private SMTP type providers. So we'll start off with the first category. The first category are people that are basically setting up these hosting panels on shared web hosts like Bluehost and all these things. So
Hmm.
these hosting companies, what they would do in the past is, if you bought a package with them to host your website, they would give you like an email server that they had, and they were extremely cheap. So they've already built out this network of mail servers, right? So what people did is they sort of built on top of that. So they'll just resell you a panel. Problem is, they're super cheap and a lot of people use them and they get them for free. So all of their networks are basically going to be blacklisted. If they're not blacklisted now, the moment you start using them, they will get blacklisted after 2 weeks to a month's time.
Hmm.
And some of the reasons is that they're smaller vendors, smaller providers, and they're exclusively being used for these kind of emails. The reason that Google and Microsoft don't suffer from the same fate is because it's a huge network, right? And they have dedicated teams that are responsible for making sure that their IPs don't end up on these blacklists or don't get blocked.
Hmm.
The smaller providers don't have that. So that's one category where people are reselling these hosting panels. Then you have a second category, which is similar, but it's these dedicated email reselling platforms. So, for example, if you're someone that wants to start a business selling email, you would become a kind of reseller, and you would white label an existing solution, and you would just put your own branding on top of it. So they're also doing that. The problem there is very similar, where you have a smaller network, a smaller number of mail servers. So they'll start doing really well for the first 2 3 weeks, and all of a sudden, because you're sending cold email, you're now being blocked from Google and Microsoft. So it's just not worth the hassle to go down that route. The final category of
It's
mail
also
servers,
not cheaper than resellers, is the
it's
interesting
not.
thing
It's
there.
it's it's actually not. They're cheaper than if you were to buy from Google and Microsoft directly, but with resellers, it's just Like in some cases, I think it's even more expensive.
And I think like the really like the worst of them, and I would consider kind of Mailscale in that category. I believe they're just white labeling like something called like postmail or
Yeah, I think.
something.
I think it's called Postal or Postal.io or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. And it's just like they're literally blanket. Like I think the thing that really triggered me is that the plans were the exact same. like like the layout and the structuring of the plans were like one to one. I was like, come on, you're not even you're not even trying
You're
here,
not trying to
man.
hide it.
Like if you're
It's
gonna scam me well. Like I should know
exactly.
about it. Makes me
It's
sick.
it's really interesting you bring that up, man. I think a lot of these people that went down this route, it's like they just discovered mail servers or resellers for the first time, and they're like, well, the cold email community doesn't really know about them yet. How can I profit off of them really quickly? And they made a shit ton of money. Some of them I think made like $2 million in a few months just by reselling to just like it's yeah it's pretty unethical because they know it doesn't work.
It was almost like an NFT project. It was almost that type of like craze
Exactly,
back in
exactly, yeah,
2021, where it's just like quick sellout, no long term prospects,
exactly.
MRR, not the Lord and Savior, uh, no exit in sight, you know, like
Just make a bunch of money and then travel the world and post pictures about what.
traveled, hide in Dubai from your enemies. Yeah,
Yeah.
basically.
The
Okay, so
the
that's good to know. And so why do you like solutions like Superwave? I've seen a lot of drama around Superwave in certain cases. I know there's some people that have reported and rather publicly that Superwave is a scam, so to speak. So
Mhm,
um, I have never tried it, and I'm not really one to just go along with with what someone else says about a tool,
mhm.
especially when I hear so many good things about it from other senders. What makes it so good?
So before we jump into Superwave, there's one more category I kind of forgot to mention with mail servers.
Mhm.
It's when you have people that will give you a dedicated server. So you have one IP rather than having a bunch of them.
That would be
Um,
like Mail Reef, yes?
yeah, Mailreef. There's InfraForge now that came out. So same
Yeah.
same same sort of theory. But within those, there's one more distinction. So InfraForge, what they're doing is they're using a regular cloud provider. I think they're on OVH or something, and they just spin up these VPS type servers, like virtual private servers, and they install an open source mail server on there, and they just sell that to you, and they'll sell that to you for a hefty profit. So they're basically using a public platform to basically sell that. Mailreef, the reason I kind of like them a little bit better is because before they rebranded. Last year they were called dinosend.com. And they were doing the same thing InfraForge is doing now, where they built on top of a public sort of cloud provider, and they shit the bed. They shit the bed. Their emails wouldn't get delivered. They got blocked all the time, and I think from that they kind of learned the
Hmm.
process and they got better. So I think they're probably, to my knowledge, the only platform that actually spent a lot of money and bought a whole bunch of IP blocks that they're designating for their clients.
They
Um,
did, and they're actually like 100% transparent about it as well. Like they go through
yeah,
the back end. Like I kind of went through the whole onboarding process with them, used them for a little while, just to kind of test, right? And to
yeah.
really just to diversify um, my sending. And they were absolute, I would say, highest pedigree when it comes to those solutions. The only problem is they had their own internally hosted like domain purchasing solution.
Oh, so you can't bring outside domains?
So you could, but you had to like pay transfer fees.
Oh, I
Um,
see. Okay.
but the problem was that they were like putting like a 50% premium on all the domains in their platform. I was like, come on, man. Like,
Man,
you're not even selling like a real thing here. Come
you're already
on.
making
Just,
money.
yeah, crazy. But
Yeah.
yeah, they're pretty good. I like the founder. Anyway, carry on. So
So
um things like Superwave then.
yeah. So Superwave is very interesting because what they're doing is to my knowledge, what they've done is there's a way that you can set up a bunch of Microsoft inboxes, so you can reduce your own cost, but then you can also distribute the volume that you're sending. So, for example, if you have one domain, you could set up 100 or so inboxes, and each inbox has a lower volume, and that comes back to that thing we were talking about, where domain level volume has something to do here. So they're better because again they're using Microsoft. So you're getting that reputation from Microsoft when your emails go out. Um, but what's interesting with them is that I think because they were pretty young, when they got started into it, and they also became kind of viral. So I think the actual tech itself makes sense, but I think the customer support part I think was a place that they lacked. So I think that's also kind of why they got a bad rep. There's still a lot of people that are using them that are doing really well. What's interesting though is that recently there's been a few alternatives to Superwave that are using a very similar model built on top of Microsoft. One that came out recently is called Scaled Mail. Scaled Mail. So they don't even have like a website yet, but they're really good in terms of their results so far from what I've seen. So that's also a good option for people. If you want to try out Scaled Mail, you can look up Dean Fiacco on Twitter. I think he's responsible for that. He's running some tests. So if you want to see an early demo, see that. But Superwave and place and tools like Scaled Mail will do better than these custom SMTP type providers, because you're essentially using Microsoft behind the scenes.
Okay, amazing. So again, gold standard, Google, Microsoft, resellers, doesn't matter if it's a reseller or not.
Yeah.
And to sort of recap here, I feel like everything we've talked about here has kind of ruined Superwave's claim to fame, which is that zero warm-up shtick. That's like, I'd say like 90% of their brand positioning as a solution.
It's really interesting because I think one of the things that we're noticing right now is if you, for example, if you buy Google inboxes, right, and you're sending to Google, so within the last few weeks, what we've seen is that Google's testing out some new spam filtering techniques, and it goes back to what you were talking about, where they're literally looking at the entire thing from both sides, from the sending side and the receiving side. So if you have a Google inbox and you're sending to a prospect that's also hosted with Google, Google has information about your setup as well as your actual email going to your prospect. So they're looking at your domain, how many inboxes you have, your sending patterns, and what we've also seen is that fresh domains and fresh inboxes, they'll go into spam right away if you send from Google to Google, and this is very, very recent. So that's a big thing that's kind of come out right now. And what people don't know is that people don't know how to segment their prospects so that they can actually send from Google to Microsoft, because Google to Microsoft right now has 100% rate in terms of landing in the inbox, which is insane, right? So there are a few of these tools that where you upload your lead list, they'll tell you exactly where your prospects are hosted, so you can do something like that. But
and actually, if you use ICPs as a verifier, and I think like most email validators in general, they'll spit out the MX records of email that you're sending to as well.
Yeah, I think Bounce Band is also really good with that, where they can spit it out. We have a free tool on our website too. It's a free tool. We'll make a better one inside the app, but if you can segment your contacts, so ESP matching. The point I was trying to make was ESP matching does not work right now for Google to Google. If you have Google, you want to send to Microsoft. And where I'm going with this is we actually had someone recently where we told them this, and so they bought these fresh domains, no warm up, no nothing, started sending from Google to Microsoft for 2 weeks, right? And then they retested their Google domains, and now they have 100% rate with Google. So it kind of adds back up to that theory that Google is looking at your sending behavior, and then they help to build up your reputation. Now, I'm not sure how long it's going to last or if they're going to roll these changes back, but it's definitely getting harder and harder to land in the inbox.
Which is why it's so important to have tools like yours. So when it comes to sort of burning domains, and when it comes to actually, before we get into whether or not a domain is burned and what represents and what indicates a burnt domain, and what the criteria is for that, when it comes to actually splitting your lists based on MX provider, is it as simple as just go through, like this is personally my process, go through, filter by MX provider, split list, only associate domains with that campaign that are of the opposite provider? Or is there a more nuanced solution to the way you can go about that?
I think what you have here, I mean, that's pretty much what we're doing as well.
Okay.
We've also seen that, Microsoft is still pretty good. It's just Google to Google right now that's being affected, but I mean, Microsoft to Google is also doing better. So yeah, if you can split up your list based on the MX records, right, that's a really good start to be able to segment them.
I'd like to pause here to take a moment to appreciate like how important it is to continue to stay on top of deliverability, especially this year. Like if you roll back literally 6 weeks ago, I was getting like 3 and 10 on Outlook domains versus 10 out of 10 for Google domains in terms of like to inbox or inbox placement rate. And now Outlook is the more successful side and Google's struggling, at least to Google. And it hasn't been that much time. And if you go back a little further, you saw an outpour of why Google is our savior and Outlook sucks at the start of the year. And then 3 months into the year, it was the reseller exodus, blame resellers, but also Google might suck and you should use Outlook, but also maybe switch to private infrastructure. So I think the answer is like, don't listen to the crowd and
Absolutely.
actually just figure it out for yourself. Like, I think if there's one place you never want to be in a loop of following the influencers and what they put out, it's cold email and it's deliverability. And the only way that you can really stay on top of these things is to just be on top of things and run tests for yourself. And I think Email Guard is really the first solution that makes that manageable at scale, which is why I was really excited to talk to you today. So to kind of push the conversation forward into that burning of domain side of things, what would you say the criteria is, and how does Email Guard actually help you avoid that?
Yeah, man. Great questions, honestly, that you've been kind of pushing me on. It's such an ambiguous thing right now for most people where they don't necessarily know if their domain's burned or not. And
Mm-hmm.
what most people do is they'll just run a test like mail reach, for example, where they just manually send an email. If it's going into spam, they're like, okay, yeah, this domain's burned and I'm just gonna go buy a new one. That's one way of doing it, but there's a few different things that you can definitely do. You can run spam filter tests, you can run inbox placement tests, to see exactly what's going on. But the biggest benefit that I think would that we can give you from a tool like we have is, you want to run the inbox placement tests from your sequencer. Now that's a bit of a lift for most people, but what that basically means is, when you send an email from your Gmail UI, for example, and you test out that domain or that inbox, the results that you're getting are not going to be the same as if that email was to come out from your sequencer. So at scale, what we've actually seen our customers doing, and we may build a connector for SmartLead and Instantly in the future, but what they're basically doing is they're using the APIs for our platform and then SmartLead and Instantly, and they're basically running these inbox placement tests weekly, and in some cases even twice a week. So what they're able to then do is, because we have a pretty large network of private inboxes, we'll tell you exactly where your email lands based on your campaign copy as well as your sending source, because that's what you want to test. You basically want to like minimize all the extra variables. So once you do that, and if you run those tests a few times, you can see where your domain is burned and where your inbox is burned. In some cases, you may just be burned for one ESP, for example, like Google to Google, right? That doesn't mean that it can't come back. But typically what we recommend is, you can continue to reuse the same domain until you're burned from both ESPs. Just segment your prospects and send to them that way. But what some of these resellers also do is they offer you free inbox placement. So depending on your setup and your cost, and if you have VAs, if you start to see your inbox placement test scores go down and you've kind of built these integrations, you can just buy a brand new domain and have your reseller build you new inboxes for it, because there's no additional cost for you except just the cost of that domain, which to most people seems to be acceptable, $4 or $5 one time per domain.
As low as like $2 if you get from Space. What's that one? Space.
From Spaceship, yeah.
Spaceship.
Spaceship and
Yeah.
Pork Bun, they have these sales too. So yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You can get it under $2. So we're seeing more and more people now with this setup. They're replacing their domains more often. But again, you can continue to run your domains in your inboxes if you're continuously running these placement tests, so you know exactly where they're burned. You no longer have to guess on just your response rate, right? You can run these real tests so you know why your response rates might be bad, and then you can use that information to make a decision.
That's actually funny. Like I'm in a lot of cold email groups and lead generation, lead bro, agency bro groups. And on Monday, which is, it's a Canadian holiday here where I am, Labor Day, everyone was having an outpour of like, oh my gosh, I have 0.3% reply rate today. And they're losing their minds. They're trying to figure out like they're spamming. I remember they're spamming like the premium inboxes like support person that happens to be in this group. And I'm like, I'm feeling terrible. I'm feeling terrible for premium inboxes because I'm saying they're also running on their infra, right? Like on their inboxes. And I'm having like the best day I've had in the last 7 days. Like my reply rate was like 11% on one of my main campaigns. And meanwhile, people are like just knee jerk reaction. So I think if you want to remove the knee jerk reaction, it becomes a must to actually integrate some proper deliverability tests. And I mean,
100%.
it's just a no brainer. There's nothing worse than not knowing if it's your message, if it's your lead list, if it's your, or if it's actually like you're sending, like your sender, like if it's actually your domain that's screwing you up. If you can at least eliminate one of the variables and always know that one variable is good to go, it's so much more manageable to just be like, okay, this isn't a relevant message. And on that note, I'll go on a little bit of a tangent here because I think what people often forget when it comes to deliverability is that one of the number one kind of determining factors of whether or not you're going to be successful is simply making sure that you're sending a relevant message to someone who wants to see it. Like if you're sending garbage that someone sees all the time, like one really good example is anyone I know that works in the e-com niche knows that they're going to have to replace domains all the time if they're sending an offer that's not unique. For example, like a UGC offer. And the reason they know this is because that person's receiving roughly 100 cold emails a week that is almost the exact same offer. So if you fail to be unique, you're probably just going to be another headache to them and get thrown in spam. A great little anecdote for this from a buddy is like, he sent on behalf of a client for the very first time and they had never sent cold email before to ecom. And a person was like, yo, man, F you. I literally already told you to unsubscribe me from the sequence last week. And he'd never sent to the guy before. So making an effort to make sure you're contacting people that actually want to be contacted. If you can, people who are contacted less frequently. But make sure you're sticking to work emails wherever you can, and maybe you can provide a little bit of insight on that as well, Cody. After I finish here, and actually just making sure you double validate your lists. You actually check them for catch-alls and get those removed. Don't just send blind to catch-alls that you think are valid from something that can't actually validate catch-alls. And then, of course, just spin taxing the hell out of your messaging. And even when you have a campaign that's winning, the next time you run this campaign to another 2, 3, 4, 5,000 people, switch up the copy. Like keep the messaging the same, but just switch up the copy to make sure that you're not sending the exact same message ever.
I think that right there, most people don't get that part. They say, oh, well, this copy is a winning copy. It was getting a 10% response rate, and then now they're running it and it's like, sub 2%, 1%. They're so confused, and I'm like, guys, just change up the copy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's such an important factor that people tend to
And
miss.
you'll almost notice that when you run the same copy again, it's not it dies down during like the campaign you ran, but it's when you start that new campaign.
100%.
Have you ever noticed that? Like,
Yeah,
I don't know if this is an
it.
actual thing, but that's what I noticed. And that's why I stopped. Like, I made it a rule of thumb within like one of my agency procedures, which is to just take the old copy and either restructure kind of the positioning of the two of the core messages to be like opposite to make it so it's like 100% different in terms of its layout and doesn't match up. And then re-spintax everything basically with new synonyms, let's say.
Yeah, no, I think it's super important, man. I think that's one of the things that, like, you used to be able to get away with zero syntax before, right?
Which is crazy.
If you had a winning script, like, you could just print, you could book, but
Spintax was literally like a novelty like 18 months ago. It's kind of crazy. Like Spintax was like, whoa, are you serious? How do you do this? Like, that's such a pain.
Exactly. It's a must have for sure, man. One of the other things, and I'm sure, you know, this is something that you know a lot more about than me, but you know, I've seen people use, you know, tools like Clay, for example, to add in that extra layer of personalization where you have you know, like super unique messages per prospect. So you know, of course you have syntax, but then you also have that level of, you know, personalization that also helps you to bypass bad filters, quite frankly.
Yeah, one of the things I do to make sure every single message has a ton of unique variables is that like unique sign off I mentioned kind of before we started this call, which is like every single person based on who they are, their industry, any kind of descriptions I can find about their company, basically get a unique sign off. And the example I gave you was, you know, if if this isn't relevant to you, just reply Y and I'll see myself out of here. That was only to Y Combinator companies. That was a hit. Got a lot of like laughy emojis in sign offs. And what people don't realize is that like a no is so much better than silence. You want people to let you know without letting you know. It needs to be, I'm not interested, but it can't be in a negative sentiment. So one of the best ways to personalize every single message is to make a personal sign off, not a personal intro. Because a personalized intro, if it's not relevant to your messaging, just looks weird, man. Like if you're just like, hey man, you know, New York, how's the pizza? You know, like, whoa, that's crazy. If you're doing something like that in this day and age, like you're just pissing your prospect off and you're reducing your chances of success. So what I recommend always is with AI, and unless you're doing like a super bespoke workflow, I know there's some out there with like RSS feeds. I've experimented with them myself where you can kind of take like someone who literally just showed up on a podcast or as a feature in an article and run them through like an enrichment process based on information in that article. And you really have like the meat and potatoes for AI to take action on. I think you can make a great message like that. And always do so in chunks when you use AI. So don't get AI to write you an email, get it to write you to the intro to the email, get it to write the value proposition of your email and the selling point, get it to write the call to action. And that way you get all the chunks and you put them together. Where the way I like to use AI with Clay is more so finding like one thing or two things or three things max that's 100% unique that I input. For example, I have like a partnership campaign going out this week for an unlimited design agency. And what we did is we're actually looking to partner with like VCs because VCs are like really warm intros to people. And we're giving them like a free piece of design. And I was like, okay, free piece of design for VC. What do we do here? VCs do events all the time. So we found an event they attended in the last 12 months. Wow. One unique variable, right? We took that unique, then we found one unique seed round investment that we were willing to like include in the graphic and make it like a graphic for as well. Again, just free intro mentioning one of their portfolio companies specifically in the seed round because they're likely lacking personnel on their team, which makes it more relevant to have like this kind of offer towards them. And then we'll also include like the specific types of businesses that they may be investing in. And you can go so on and so forth. And then all of a sudden you have a 100% unique message every time. Another way is to do like an ideas-based message where you're taking action on a set amount of information that you have about the prospect, their website, their LinkedIn description or whatever, and you're coming up with unique ideas. So in that case, it could be like, the reason it mattered that they attended an event, it was because we were offering to do banners, like a banner for a future event. as the, like the unique call to action. And if they didn't attend an event, they got a different call to action. So again, ways that you can kind of like segment your lead list without segmenting your lead list almost. And yeah, that's more the ways we like to use it, where it's like something you can't mess up. And oftentimes it's a variable that we're actually just directly scraping rather than having AI even take action on in certain cases, just to make sure it's like 100% this exists, 100%, no ands, ifs, or buts. Because you never want to be caught with your pants down sending something that's just wrong and it was supposed to be personal. That usually pisses people off.
It's really funny that you mentioned this, because from all the people that I've been talking to, the guys that are extremely successful with cold email, that are not necessarily so obsessed about the tech, but they're more obsessed about the messaging and the prospecting and all that. Of course, it's good to have the right tech as well, but those are the guys like you, that are making a shit ton of money. And then you have people that are, just kind of like asking questions like, where do I buy my domains from? those are the kind of guys that are not going to make it. So you have to, of course you have to start from somewhere, but within cold email, I think if you're serious, you have to level up really quickly, because the bar for really good campaigns, for really good outbound, for people that are, people like you that are running cold email for big companies, the bar is just so high. Most people, they need to learn a lot to be able to get there, because I can guarantee you right now, from all the people that I've spoken to, there's maybe like the top like 1% or 0.5% that are doing the workflows that you're doing, and those are the guys that are successful, because regardless of tech, they'll figure it out.
100%. Yeah, I think when it comes to cold email and like making sure that you can send like a truly unique message, it's literally just the lead list, man. Like 9 times out of 10, if you're sending to one archetype, you're going to be able to make the message super duper unique. Like, the only way AI can really take action at scale is if you have variables that you're feeding it that are uniform. So imagine if you're doing a campaign to many job titles versus one job title. If you're doing one job title, all of a sudden your prompt can learn from outputs, right? You can refeed examples back into it, and your prompt can learn from outputs that were directed towards a single type of job title, as opposed to poisoning that little pocket of the LLM that you're pulling information from with, this is 3 ways that our product is actually helping a CEO, but here's 3 ways that it's helping a head of growth, and here's 3 ways it's helping. I hope you see what I'm hinting at, where you're basically poisoning your outputs. Whereas if you've taken the time to have a truly targeted bespoke lead list, and you've decided to filter out, companies that are 30 people or less, and you're really just contacting founders and C-suite, versus companies that are 30 and above and are going to have these unique positions with unique responsibilities, and tailoring your message to that, you're looking at unique messages every single time, right?
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's a pretty good place to wrap up for me. I've got to hop into a sales call. I want to give you a chance to, one, talk about your product one more time. And then if there's any final thing that you think is super important that we missed, feel free to throw it in there.
Yeah, sounds good, man. So in terms of my product, so what we have here is, it's just a bunch of tools that can benefit you with your outreach. So you can, do stuff like, for example, your domain setup. If you're just getting into it, we can help you generate the SPF, the DMARC records. We can also get you to connect your inboxes, so you can test to make sure that, just because your domain records are correct doesn't necessarily mean that your ESP is signing it correctly. So you can also connect them to test those. You can also monitor DMARC messages. Most people, what they do is their inbox gets flooded with a bunch of these DMARC messages. So if you were to use our platform, it can actually show you exactly, where your emails are coming from. It helps you fine tune certain things. We have spam filter tests. We have inbox placement tests. We have this one feature that's for hosted domain redirect. So, the thing that I talked about way at the start, where if you're using these public registrars, right, the only caveat there is when you route your domain, when you forward your secondary domain to your main domain and you use their forwarding, you can be lumped in on these shared IPs and stuff. And then if that IP is blacklisted, that's going to harm your deliverability. So what we do is we have this feature called hosted domain redirects where you can route your secondary domains through our network instead, and we kind of, remove you from those blacklists and get you a better reputation there. Beyond that, I mean, we have a pretty robust API for some of the more, technical people, the more advanced agencies. What they can do is they can build the testing into their workflows, and we have people that regularly test their inboxes and their domains at least once a week or twice a week.
Mhm.
So then it's just one more metric for you to figure out when you need to replace your domains and inboxes, so you're not burning your leads. There's a lot more stuff there, but again, feel free to go in and check it out. And then there's a promo code that I'll share with you, that you can kind of give to your audience. 5% off all of our plans. We have this promo right now where if you're a serious agency, we have a discounted plan right now for $349 monthly, and it gets you like a shit ton of credits and stuff that you can deal with.
Perfect. And that's at emailguard.io for anyone listening. Emailguard.io. Perfect. And if anyone wants to find Cody here, just check out Cody Smith on Twitter. He's probably going to give you his WhatsApp. I'm never on WhatsApp, but he'll give you his WhatsApp. And if you have any questions, he's unbelievably helpful. He is a true build-in public / build-in private founder. He's publicly helpful, but private with who he is. Again, he's the new age Satoshi for email deliverability. So definitely check him out. And I really appreciate you coming on to have this conversation, because I'm pretty sure we have just created the best cold email deliverability video on the internet.
That's awesome, man. Thanks again for having me. And it was really nice talking to you, man. Hope we get to do some more of these soon.
Definitely.